That's the one.
Yes. And we're live talking about sourdough bread.
We are. Hello on an e-commerce podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, just talking about the culture of masterminds, right? I mean, that was the thing we talked about last week. I'm genuine. As I was saying, it's not just a marketing thing, like off air as well. If you talk to me privately, you get the same thing. I think I'm passionate about the mastermind thing. So today, also another topic which is close to our hearts, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Coaching. So we're broadcasting live into 3 or 4 of our groups and your YouTube channel. So hello, everyone. If you're watching live with us, we're going to record another episode of The E-Commerce Leader. We're honored to be able to blast these out live. And then, we take the MP3 file and turn it into our podcast. So they come out that way later on.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone use the word honored and blast in the same sentence.
We're honored to blast
uniquely
people.
American marketer mix. I like it. Yeah, I'm honored to blast with you, man. I look forward to our talks every week. I mean, I really am truly honored to be able to talk to you each week. It's great. I mean, you're such a great business thinker, and it's good fun. So I hope everyone who listens enjoys it. I know that there are some people out there who I think are pretty savvy that are enjoying it because they get in touch and say so.
Well,
not least, so sometimes they join me as clients as well. So
appreciate you saying that. Just as a side topic, as we ramble here for a moment or two before we kick off the podcast, the e-commerce power book that came out in January was number 2 in several categories this week on Amazon.com. And also, I didn't look in the UK to see if it hit number 1, but it was real close in several categories in the UK. And so that's fun. And
exciting times.
We're grateful for that.
Yeah.
15 people have left me a review so far, so feel free to jump on and leave a review if you've enjoyed that book. But that was a fun little side shenanigan this week. I was a part of a little group of e-commerce authors that put their books out there. So
cool.
Anyway, all right. So let's jump in here to the topic of the day and kick off the podcast. If you're watching with us live, we're happy to answer questions along the way or weave them in and do a Q&A segment as well. But if you're watching by replay, of course, feel free to leave questions underneath these videos. We're happy to connect that way with you. Ready to do this?
I am.
To jump in? All right. Well, let's pull it up here and kick this thing off. Here we go. Famous Dallas Cowboys coach Tom Landry once said, "A coach is someone who tells you what you don't want to hear, who has you see what you don't want to see, so you can be who you've always known you could be." Now, as e-commerce coaches and also people who have received coaching, Michael and I both know, of course, we're jaded about this because we do coaching as part of our income for a living. But we know that coaching can lead to huge performance breakthroughs. And so today's topic is a deep dive into how to maximize your use of a coach or mentor in your e-commerce business. Michael, are you ready to jump into this topic?
I am. And by the way, I really like the Tom Landry quote. It's kind of tough love. I like that's kind of my kind of style. I like it.
Yes. And for the Brits there, that is a American rules football coach. He was famous for football in the U.S., the Dallas Cowboys. So yeah, a fun quote. And I think it gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Which is a coach's job is to, address issues that need to be addressed in a way that gets peak performance to occur. And that's the goal of it. And when that's done right, coaches are amazing and awesome and transformational. And of course, when it doesn't happen, it stinks.
Well, otherwise it's just somebody telling you what you don't want to hear and asking you to see what you don't want to see, I guess. So.
And you don't become who you knew you could be.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You become Dr. Jekyll or whatever, and don't do well with it. So yeah,
this has got very dark very quickly, man. But joking apart, I mean, yes, I think coaching is, I guess people come with high expectations, and therefore, if it doesn't work, sometimes they can be very disappointed. And that makes sense. I think high expectations aren't necessarily a bad thing, but I guess today we should explore, what are good expectations to have from a coach, and equally, what are things that you probably shouldn't put on a coach or try and get out of coaching, because it can't be an answer to absolutely everything, although a lot comes out of it for sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you, just to tee things up for us, what do you think are the first reasons someone should hire a coach or consultant? Why should they do it?
So a couple of reasons. I think first of all, if you don't do it, it's really hard to see the wood for the trees. It's very hard, particularly if you're a solopreneur, and most startups are, if not all, it's sort of mom and pop or small business type startups, as opposed to Silicon Valley funded ones. It's really, really hard to get out of your own head. And it's doubly true if you work on an online based business. E-commerce, by definition, the EBIT means that you are online. And that's really critical. So you may be missing two things. Number one, you may be missing a danger because you don't know what you don't know. And you also may be sitting on an amazing opportunity that, because for you it's easy, you also don't see it. You often have a big vision and you may have a lot of experience, but putting those together into a longer term arc is often something you can't do. And there's a big danger of making plans and not following through. That's the number one thing. So there's many reasons why doing stuff on your own doesn't work. So the flip side of that is why you should hire a person. First of all, you can see the business objectively as an asset, incredibly important if you want to build it to sell. You can see hidden dangers. You can see missing opportunities. You can really clarify your goals, get it out of your head by articulating it to somebody else, and then get a plan to get those goals. And then finally, and most importantly, having made plans, which is all very well, you actually implement. And I think for me, those are the main ones.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think you're totally right. I think that's really the trick, isn't it? Is the implementation piece. And as the Tom Landry quote suggests, the coach sometimes can serve as that accountability to kind of goad you towards what you maybe don't want to be doing. But if you have an accountability partner to someone who says, did you do your 25 push-ups every day for the last week, or whatever it is, if it's not e-commerce coaching, or did you send that email, then that you've got somebody who's going to help you. And I think that's the main trick of it. Let me ask you this question. I've got a story to tell, but I want to hear your perspective on this. Do you think there's a difference between a coach, a consultant, and a mentor? Those three phrases, or how are they interchangeable in your mind, or what do you think about the three?
Very good question. I often feel a bit guilty about this because I use the word mentoring in this system that I've set up, which I've run for 5 years now, one-to-one coaching / mentoring for beginners in the Amazon private label space. Having said that, I'm a bit ambiguous about the word. And for starters, I get a bit careless about, is it the same as coach or consultant? Sometimes I kind of use them interchangeably.
Yeah.
And then I think, but actually I shouldn't do that because they probably are a bit more different than I make them. So I guess, strictly speaking, I guess a mentor is somebody who's done what you want to do and just tells you what to do. A coach is somebody who kind of encourages you. But having said that, Tom Landry, I presume, had been an American football player and was therefore, talking from experience. And then, of course, the whole consultant thing, I suppose it implies more that you're brought in from the outside to look at an existing business. Somehow that's the flavor for me. But I'm not entirely clear-minded about it, so I'm grateful, Freddie, for clarification. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I as we were working through this little, pre-show outline, I was starting to ponder this. Here's a framework I think I might suggest. What if it's something like this? I think there is some nuance here between the three phrases. To me, a consultant is a very short-term role that's a technical role. They're going to show you how to set something up or set it up for you, or show you a technical skill set, walk you through that. Maybe the duration there is the shortest in my mind. I look at how I think about these. And then maybe a coach is a longer term relationship. Maybe not forever, but it could be for a long term, for years. You could have a coach. And then maybe a mentor is someone who's in a different category altogether. Like, so for example, I have somebody in my life who I consider a mentor. We go to breakfast together every Saturday morning. I don't pay him to be my mentor. He's just 15 years older than me and has been a business operator for his, a whole adult life. And so we buy each other breakfast, take turns. I bought yesterday morning. He buys next Saturday. And it's just simply informal. And, half the time we're not talking about hardcore business. But when we do, I look to him as, I think, an elder, someone who just has more experience. Some areas I have way more experience. He doesn't know anything about e-commerce stuff, much at all. But finance and staffing and those kinds of issues, facilities, and he's just gotten tons of trade skill and experience. And so I look at him more like a mentor. And so I think there is nuance there between the two. I wouldn't consider giving him money for what he does. Whereas a coach or consultant, it's a contractual relationship. You know that it's a paid for position in your life. And so I guess that's the nuance I would bring to it. I don't know if that makes sense or not. If that is
It's interesting. I mean, I think I was just thinking maybe I should change the word mentoring, which I've been considering for years. But I think rather than worrying about semantics, I guess the relationship, in the end, it's a relationship, isn't it? And what you're talking about is the nature of the relationship and the expectations. What is the kind of person? How long term is it? Does money change hands? There's an expectation of technical services versus kind of, mindset stuff versus, just somebody kind of absorbing somebody's experience. And I really like that. I think in the end, two things strike me. One is to be clear in your own mind what it is you're looking for, and it's hard to know. I guess you need to look out there and see what the options are, and it's very confusing. I spoke to a guy on Friday, I think, about the whole Amazon coaching thing, and he said it's so confusing. There's so many people claiming so much stuff, and I said, I totally hear you. Go away and think it through. I said I can't actually work with you at the moment because I don't think you're clear what it is you're wanting. And we talked about the business model, so we talked about comparing business models on Amazon, and of course I really, what I should have done is say, go listen to this podcast and then we'll talk. In retrospect, I thought, I wasted an hour talking to this guy when I could have just said, go and listen to Jason and myself talk about this, and actually you should clarify, then go and do some homework, and then come back in 2 weeks. So I guess if you don't know what you're looking for, it's hard to find it. But the other thing that strikes me is this, that what we've been talking about, I don't think there needs to be either or in Jim Collins' phrase. I think it's both. And in the end, you can have people in your life. Like I've got somebody like that. He's a family member who would be insulted if I tried to pay him. It would be a weird relationship. And besides which he makes several $100,000 a year equivalent. I can't pay what he's worth. But I learn stuff from him, and then I pay people for specific things for a specific period, and then there are some people that I've had for a longer period who've been more sort of holding my hand, but it's also a paid relationship. So I think the answer is to have all of them really in your life, really.
And maybe we should do a whole another episode on mentors, because I do think there's a category there. You're right. Like the mentors worth having, you couldn't pay them. They're doing it out of the generosity of their heart, or just because they find enjoyment in, the intellectual curiosity of learning with other people or from other people. They're not in the business of high performance coaching or anything like that. So yeah, it's an interesting issue. So
final to put a cap on that. This isn't just an abstract idea. I work with I've got a very enterprising guy. He's working in Europe, and he's selling on marketplaces outside of Amazon, so Bull.com and other things. He's had a really, really good start, and he basically put together a kind of brains trust where I was in there and being paid for my time. He's got his business partner who's got about 10% of the business who's bought in. He's been doing some Excel whiz sheets, whiz stuff. So I've been saying, do this, that, and the other with the finance, my obsession with various financial things that are a bit complex. And then he's brought in his dad, who's invested a bit in the company, and then two other guys who are kind of mentors from different industries, one with a marketing background, with an M&A background. And actually it's super powerful, and it was a really positive meeting, and we're going to meet quarterly. So in the end, it can be as practical as literally putting those people in the same room and also having separate conversations. So there you go. It's not just an abstract thought.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so I've got a story to tell you.
Please.
And so let me share this story, and then it can tee up some further insights, I think. When I was in high school, I think it was a sophomore year, I had this idea to learn to play the guitar. And there was also a guy who was in high school with me named Norman Hetzel. I'm sure he'll never listen to this podcast, but maybe he will, who knows, but great guy. And he also was going to learn to play the guitar. And so there we were, sophomore year. And so I knew somebody through my church who did guitar lessons. He was like a rock guitar guy, and he was really good. And he did local lessons at the local music store. So I talked to him. His name's Jim Armstrong. He's a great guy. And so I signed up for music lessons. And so on his schedule at the music store I had rode my bike over there. And but then Norman Hetzel, his parents, or I don't know how he knew the connection, but there's a famous guitarist, Segovia. And then you've heard the name, Michael. Is this right? You know these things. You're like,
Yeah, I know I'm an expert in classical guitar, but yeah,
but you know these things.
definitely. Yeah,
so
of course, very famous.
Segovia had this student named Christopher Parkening, and Christopher Parkening is also very, very famous in his own right, and is on the West Coast here in California. And I believe it was Christopher Parkening, but this is 30 years ago, so I might have my facts wrong. It was him or one of his students, but I think it was him. But was a classical guitar teacher in San Francisco, and that was about 2 hours away from where we lived. And so Norman, as I recall, would go every weekend to San Francisco and get lessons from this famous maestro guitarist guy. And so life goes on, and I had done my lessons, and Jim was really, really good, and he was cool. But you know how it was, like 3 months in, 4 months in, 5 months in, I'm like a G chord is kind of hard to get your hands right on the guitar, and I can't do anything I can't do bar chords or anything like that. It's just open chords. And then we do this thing at our school, this Renaissance fair. And the Renaissance fair kicks off, and I see on the sheet of the events, Norman Hetzel, such and such song, classical guitar. And so he gets out on the stage for the Renaissance fair, and he just starts going, man. I mean, he is just like on fire, crushing on the guitar. And I was like, what in the world is happening right now? I could barely do a simple little song, and he is just rocking the entire school with this classical song on the guitar. And I always look back on that, and I think, what was the process by which in 3 months' time, or whatever it was, 5 months' time, he went from zero to on stage, everyone looking at like, wow, Norman is amazing. And the process by which I went from zero to only knowing 2 or 3 chords in 3 to 5 months' time. And of course, the element involved is he found a teacher that was world class. And I'm not saying that the instructional content was maybe different. Maybe it wasn't. But maybe the act of him having to go to San Francisco for, a 2-hour drive every weekend, and the stature of the guy, and how much it cost, and all of the elements involved in that escalating the kind of, intensity of what was happening, was a radical departure from my outcome.
Interesting. And, I think you've raised a couple of points, which is kind of at the heart of this thing. And it's ironic that you're the one talking about music lessons as an example.
I knew you'd like that one.
I've sat in so many lessons as the teacher, and also the other side. I had a similar thing when I chose a teacher to play the piano. I was kind of vaguely in the market for a piano teacher a few years ago. This is when I was already relatively advanced in a professional player, and I heard this guy play. I literally didn't even see his face because his back was turned to me as it happened, where this little sort of informal concert hall. And I thought, wow, that's my teacher. I want this guy. This Russian guy. Yeah. And I heard him play after being working with him for a few months. And he was just incredible. I'm like a full-on piano virtuoso, like no holds barred. And I think when you have massive respect for somebody, when you really choose a person that does it for you, and that's a personal chemistry thing, isn't it? Yeah. When you pay good money, when you have to make efforts, like I used to travel 2 hours to see him as well. It wasn't that geographically far, but it took me 2 hours on the trains to see him. Yeah. We'd have tea from a samovar, and he'd sort of regale me with tales of various kind of things around Russia, and it was a whole cultural experience. And maybe that's kind of a blend of a coach and a mentor in a way that we're discussing here, right? I wouldn't purport to be this kind of giant figure in e-commerce. That wouldn't be me if somebody looked for me. But nevertheless, you got to have a chemistry. As somebody put it the other day, and he's in the business of selling coaching, but he's very good at it. He said, "People don't buy coaching; they buy coaches. They want a certain personal connection. There's a certain spark that happens. It's a relationship in the end, isn't it? Yeah. It's very interesting what you say. I think that the degree of intensity, the respect you have for a teacher, the amount of money you've got on, the amount of effort you have to put in, these have a big impact on the work you do when you get home, which is where the real learning happens.
I think that's probably the biggest takeaway is you put yourself in a situation in which you have to show up, big time. Yeah. Because you've made a big deal out of having this coach.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would go to Pete's Music Store, which was the local music shop with the, you know, Jim, my music instructor. And sometimes I would forget and I just wouldn't show up, and he'd be like, "Hey man, where are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I forgot." And sometimes I'd get there and there'd be a little Post-it note on the door. "Hey bro, I'm at pizza with everybody. Come over to, you know, Straw Hat Pizza." You know, it's like, so it was just that level of informality. And that wasn't his fault. It wasn't my fault. It was just the nature of the relationship. And so I think there's a lot there to think through. Okay, so hopefully I knew that you would like that story, and
so the listeners can relate. I imagine most people have tried to sort of learn to play some music at some point with varying degrees of success. So let's get into the how do we deal with these areas. And you were saying there were sort of a few different areas that you were thinking of that come out of your guitar story as well. So what do you think are the sort of areas that coach provided for your friend or, you know, mentor, whatever it is, that you didn't get from your teacher?
Yeah, I think there are probably, you know, 4 or 5 areas that a really high performance coach brings to the party, and creates the context in which you bring to the party. And so I'll just mention them. You know, let's just say there are 5 things here. The first one is technical skill improvement. And so the technical skill improvement in our world, of course, is e-commerce operation. And, you know, you guys who sell intensively on Amazon and are expert at that, and I watch because Kyle, you know, my business partner, is the Amazon expert that works with our coaching clients. And I got to tell you, the level of technical skill set necessary to sell on Amazon is intense, man. And I always watch as the Shopify guy, and then people are like, can I do Shopify? I was like, dude, if you can sell on Amazon, you can do Shopify. It's like Amazon is like a Swiss Army knife of complexity so anyway, so technical skill improvement is one thing. And, you know, you'd be surprised how many times there are competent sellers, really successful sellers, but they have this huge gap in their knowledge. There's a whole part of something that they've never even heard about or learned about, never poked into this whole area of whatever it is, you know, on Seller Central and Amazon, for example. And so that technical skill improvement is like, oh, here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. And that's the first thing. So, and I've got 5 of these, but any thoughts on technical skill improvement?
And I think that it's a bit more like this, what you were talking about, to use a framework that we discussed, the sort of relationship. That's a bit more of a consultancy type relationship, and I think there's nothing wrong with that either. I think I've got that kind of relationship with a couple of people. One is an American guy that I'm talking through with how he can sell better in Europe, and sort of cultural adjustments and the sort of whys and wherefores. Americans getting their head around VAT is quite hard, and obviously I'm not in the business of tax advice, but I can give them the basics and then put them in touch with somebody who can explain it better. So I think that's really important. And exactly as you said, selling on Amazon is so many multi-sided and really complex and very technical that there's bound to be gaps in your armor. And I find it relatively easy to help. Actually, to my surprise, recently realize more and more it's easier to help a 7 or 8 figure Amazon seller than it is somebody who's a beginner, because a beginner is kind of all over the map with everything. Whereas somebody who's got really amazing operational ability but is really lousy at doing good listings is actually pretty easy to help, because they've already got cash flow, they've already got the difficult bit sorted, I think, for me, and I can help them with a sort of what I think of easier, the marketing piece.
I think we found that too. We found it as well, where if there's somebody who has momentum, they have sales velocity, and they have their product sorted out, and but then they still have big gaps, and so that technical skill. And for us, for the context in which Kyle and I coach, we frequently get successful Amazon sellers who want to expand into omni-channel. So they want to go onto Shopify, or maybe they want to go onto Walmart, and they know that Shopify is, you know, central to that. So so what ends up happening is you have somebody who's very competent, technically just, you know, crushing it on Amazon, but then they have very, very basic questions about Shopify. And the common answer that we give is, oh, it's easy. Don't stress. Here's how you do this. But they just don't know, you know, and so you're learning new skill sets. And a good coach does that. It's like, here's how this new thing works. And that's important. You know, all of these attributes your coach has to be able to do. So you have to have a coach that actually knows the technical components of these platforms. And for Kyle and I, it's been fun because he's just insanely expert at Amazon. And on my side, I think we've done now 2.6 or 2.7 million transactions through Shopify.
Wow.
And so it's fun to spend time and energy with people on Shopify. So that's the technical skill set piece. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. And so what's your second piece on this?
I think business advisory. And I think you could almost even call it like we've had coaching clients who have said, you guys are like an informal board of directors. And I run a charity as well. So Powerful is our charity. And I have a board of directors. And a board of directors is there to give you business advice and serve as a sounding board for hard decisions. And so there's got to be a level of maturity, a level of just, years of experience, miles on the odometer, kilometers on the odometer, where you can say, hey, my coach, he's done this stuff for a long time. And I asked him about this, and here was his perspective. And you've got to have a coach that you trust, that okay, they've been around the block a lot of times.
Yeah.
And these hard choices that I'm making are still unique. They're still my decision. They're still my responsibility to execute on. But at least I have someone that I can ask the hard questions to, that I can really talk through the issue with. Because I think a lot of us as small business owners in the e-commerce space find ourselves making increasingly complex decisions in a vacuum of, conversation. We just don't have people who can talk to. You can't talk to your employees about some stuff. You can't talk to your family about some of this stuff. And you can end up in a situation where you just don't have good input or advice from wise peers. And I think a good coach can really help in that regard.
And to the point we were making earlier, I suppose I sort of made this point already. So I guess that I think the board of advisors, it's really the right way to think. There's this, there are a few things. I mean, first of all, the Tom Landry coach quote, somebody who tells you what you don't want to hear. A lot of the time, I think the value I bring to a lot of my clients is simply, please don't do this. It will lose you a lot of money. And especially when you're importing a lot of private label stuff from China, $10,000 a pop, plus the launch cost, plus whatever opportunity cost of not doing something else with that money for a year, and whatever you're doing with your time. And beginners don't like that. And I find that the more advanced people are like, I thought so. I just needed to hear that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And that comes down to this sort of maturity of the client, frankly, how willing they are to listen to expert advice, and without either being overly influenced by it and neglecting their own sort of trust in their own instincts, which I guess is developing but may not be very developed, or on the other hand trying to pass responsibility for everything on to everyone else. And that relationship is really tricky, but I think it's essential, like to be the CEO, to surround yourself by expert advisors, not just a coach, at very least an accountant and a lawyer. Those are the minimum. And if you're importing from China, a freight forwarder, probably a VAT expert if you're trying to sell into Europe now. Those are the minimum. That's at 5. I mean, without talking about photographers and other people who aren't really advisory, but you outsource work to. So, that in the end, you're going to end up with more and more people giving you input, which I think is essential. But you equally need to know what your role is as the business owner, and in the end, you are free to ignore it once you've digested it. But I think it's silly not to at least ask for it in the first place. Is my take on that.
I think there are very few times in our coaching experience and that Kyle and I would say we've had an ultimatum with somebody where we said, the phrase that I remember, I don't know why but I think it's Billy Bob Thornton in the movie Armageddon with Bruce Willis, where they're drilling into the middle of the asteroid, but they're not meeting their goals. They're behind on their goals. Yeah. And then the president says, I'm just going to blow the whole thing up with a nuclear bomb. And then I remember Billy Bob Thornton says, I guarantee you, if you push that button, you kill us all. And I remember like that. It's like such a pivotal moment in that movie. There's very few times in a coaching relationship where you have to say, I guarantee you, if you push that button, you kill your business. But on occasionally
it is.
There are those choices where as an outsider, you say to yourself, oh my gosh, please listen to what I'm saying right now. And sometimes they do. Yeah. And sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, you're not on the field of the game playing for them. They're the ones that are running their business, and you just have to give your best advice with clarity and believe in the best of for their own outcome. But yeah, anyway, so that's fun stuff. So
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I've had conversations like that, and nobody has a crystal ball. If you've been around the block enough times, your crystal ball's probably better than somebody who's not
but you could
in
be
a
wrong,
particular
too.
area. But you could be wrong, and that's the mind mind bending bit, to put it politely, right? I mean, there's no such thing as certainty. There's only opinion, but some opinions are worth listening to, I guess, and there are quite a few examples in business life of people ignoring their coaches or consultants' advice. But I tend to go with probability, and I want high probability of success. And if there's a lot of money involved, you want to either a very, it comes out to the asymmetric risk reward thing, right? I mean, in essence, what a good coach or consultant, whether it's a lawyer, to include them in that for the moment, or a very, very technical consultant, an engineer perhaps, etc., then they are there to de-risk things, I think. That doesn't mean that you don't therefore say yes to a project that they are a bit iffy about, but at least you thought it through and you know what the risks are, and so you could at least mitigate them in some way. So there you go. It's nothing exciting about this stuff, but it's the real life stuff.
Yeah.
So more encouragingly, you got another way of using a coach that is a bit more upbeat. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I always describe when we were working with new prospective, coaching clients. I always describe what Kyle and I do is one part of it is just being a cheerleader and being an encourager, and I find myself in our coaching conversations more and more trying to pause and take moments where the client has represented their outcome to us and trying to be very intentional about stopping and just celebrating that moment with them and saying, that's amazing. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just ask them to look back like, hey, well, where were you at a year ago? Or, what was this like 6 months ago, whether it was a, revenue number or whatever, just to give context by which they can be encouraged themselves. Because, all of us are in just the grind with our businesses so much, and the things that are broken are always the urgent things. And we can sometimes just blow past major milestones of real achievement and real positive outcome that any sane person would be like, let's throw a party. Like if you were at a Google or something like, let's take Friday and throw a party because we reached our big goal. But usually as kitchen table entrepreneurs or smaller business owners, we're just like back to this, grindstone the very next minute after we've achieved a goal. And so for me, I think a coach who's thoughtful about the emotional state of the client would be one that would be intentional about celebrating and really giving somebody an attaboy, attagirl, way to go. You just crushed something that's hard to crush, but you made it look great and easy even. And let them receive that. And I think if it comes from a technical peer where you're like, hey, I do this all day long with our company, and I know how hard that was to achieve, and you just did something really great. That's very different than your mom saying, I'm so proud of you. You seem to be not failing in life.
That's a rather weak. Yeah, I'm so proud of you. You seem to be not failing in life. That's hilarious. But I like this. I mean, I think this is one of the things that Americans culturally are just better at. They get a bit sort of, frankly,
Sentimental or something,
well, I don't know. The downside on this and social media meets this culture ends up with the humble brag thing, which is horrendous, and we talked about it before. But as a private conversation, I think that's really good. I think the Brits are kind of halfway between that. I'm talking of, music teachers, the traditional ones
You're
from the countries.
To German, right?
I was going to say, but the countries where people are generally technically superb players are the Germans and the Russians, and they are tough as hell. My Russian piano teacher was a big sort of cuddly Russian bear. He was absolutely lovely, but many of them are pretty tough. Like my wife had a really super tough teacher, and the lack of praise does make things really tough. I mean, I think if you're really homing people for like the Olympic standard, which is kind of what you need to be if you're going to be even close to a solo piano career, which is what my wife studied as an undergrad. That's tough as hell. But I mean, you're right. I think we give ourselves a hard time anyway, and it's a very British thing to kind of rather discount, not be willing to celebrate success enough. It's not part of the culture here. And I think you're right that privately, to give somebody the props, you're right. It's something I don't really consciously do enough for myself or for my clients, actually. So I really like that. It's a good reminder.
I think
And
it's very
yeah.
beneficial behavior for coaches because honestly,
Mm,
you're right. You can't go to your family and friends or post on Facebook, "Hey, I just made $30,000 net profit for the first time in a
yeah.
month."
Yeah.
Like you can't say stuff like that.
Well,
But
they think you're bragging, and also they have no
right,
idea how hard that was to
right.
achieve. I mean,
But with a
was that just
coach,
normal for you, or is that
yeah,
just a real sweat, or
yeah,
what did you have to do to get there? And yes, exactly. They don't have the context, which,
yeah,
as you said, a technical peer understands what that means. So no, you're
yeah,
bang on. It has
yeah,
to come from somebody who gets them.
yeah.
Which, by the way, that's another reason for a mastermind. I know we talked about
Mhm,
separately.
mhm,
That's an amazing place to celebrate wins with people who actually get it.
yeah,
Understand. But a coach is also a place to do that. Agreed.
yeah. Okay, fourth one on my list is a warning provider. Now, I already talked about the Billy Bob Thornton quote.
Yeah.
You press that button, I guarantee you kill us all.
Mm.
So, warning providers, that's very dramatic. It hardly ever happens. Most of the time, it's nuance. Most of the time, a warning provider as a coach is more like, if you do it this way, you're going to run into this problem. Um, I'm reminded of the Sherpas at like wherever it is, all
Oh,
the
Everest, probably, I
Everest and
guess,
all the
yeah.
places. The
K2,
Sherpa,
yeah.
those are servant-hearted, humble guides. It's a good way to think about coaching, where it's like, no, you don't want to take that path over there. That's a sheer cliff straight to your, demise, or it's just harder.
Yeah.
And this path over here is easier. And
Mm.
so I look at it kind of that way. A lot of times it is nuance. It is just choices where one would work one way and the other would work a different way, but
Yeah.
there's the nuance in between, and that's what you want to share with people and insights. And sometimes you don't know the answer and you just co-create with them or commiserate with them, um,
Yeah.
and research together with them. But many times you'll say, oh, we have 9 clients that have done this exact same thing previously, and here's the outcomes that they've learned about. And so I think that warning provider is generally just a gentle, pointing in the right direction. So that's the fourth idea. Yeah.
I like that one a lot. And here's the thing: there's a case. There's an artificial dichotomy that people can assume that comes out of this, which is either somebody saying "Don't do that," nuclear button sort of situation that you
Mhm.
were describing, or just sail on in blissful ignorance. And actually, what I think it comes down to is this: like accurate risk assessment, which sounds very unsexy, like the sort of thing an insurance company would demand from you. But actually, of all sort of sexy, kind of very classic entrepreneurial figures, but Richard Branson is the most famous one from the British version,
Mhm.
and he's famously always doing crazy stuff. But he says that I was just reading the prelude to a book, Business Strip Bare, that he wrote. I think it was about in the middle of the 2008-9 sort of recession, which had kicked off because the banks hadn't looked at the downside risk. And he said he was speaking in some kind of famous luncheon to business people, and he said, yeah, what I don't understand is why they didn't protect against the downside risk. That's business job number one. And for all that everyone sees him as a risk-taking swashbuckling, yeah, it's calculated
Mhm.
risk,
Yeah.
very calculated. And in order to do that, you want to know, first of all, what are the risks? If you're not a lawyer, how will you know what the legal risks are? If you're not an accountant, how would you see
Mhm.
20, 30, 40 businesses, a sort of arc of 30 years? You can't get that on your own. And therefore, it's not a question of no or yes. It's a question of how risky is this? How much of my capital should I put into
Right.
this?
Yeah.
What are the potential downsides? How do I guard against it? So
Mhm.
that you end up with my other obsession, risk reward ratio that is skewed. So you minimize the risk and you maximize the upside.
Mhm.
That's how professional investors and professional entrepreneurs get rich. I think it's
Mhm.
not about yes or no. It's like the nuance. And
Mhm.
that's where, yeah, as you said, somebody who's got 9 other clients who's done the same thing is super useful. I mean,
Yeah.
that could save you years, literally years of pain. I think that's when you really, your coach earns their money for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. My last one here on this little list is number 5 is confidence builder or contextualization creator. And here's what I mean by that. Many times, if you're, building an e-commerce company, I think all of us are in this situation or have been. You've never done it before, and a lot of times you don't know what good looks like. You don't know what what the context in which you're operating should look like. So a good coach is somebody who can say, hey, what's your, here's an example I always use with my clients, just as a little takeaway. I always talk about spending 8 to 12% of your top line revenue on marketing, because that's a contextualization of your profit and loss statement and how you have your expense structured in your business. Many people have never heard that before. And consumer packaged goods spend up to like 20% on marketing. So, but when I share that with them, they're like, oh, okay, well, that's easy to figure out. What was my top line revenue the last month or last quarter, last year, and how much then did I spend on all the advertising related costs? They start to get a framework by which they operate their business, and that coaching, that speaking into someone's a business. If you've never been there before, it's like you just don't know the lay of the land. And there are many such examples in an e-commerce business where people might be crushing something compared to all their other peers in the industry, but they don't see it as successful because they don't know what the other peers in the industry have as outcomes. And so a good coach is able to say, oh, 3.4% e-commerce conversion rate in your Shopify site, that's good. The industry average is 2%. You're almost doubling the industry average. I'm like, what? I didn't know that. So this is the kind of framework and contextualization that a good coach can bring to the party. And so I think that's a key part of a coach's role, is create a framework in which you can explain the lay of the land in such a way that it inserts confidence into the business owner, so that they understand, oh, I kind of know I'm getting a handle for how to run this business. I'm getting a handle for benchmarks and what's plausible in certain areas of my business, what's industry average, what's better than average, below average, and how I should look at it. So.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, sometimes you work on your own, you think you're doing badly when you're doing okay. Yeah, so I had a client who came to me. He knew it's a very, very small sort of early stage, but he's been trading for a year, and I think his profit margin on one product was sort of 53% gross margin before any other costs or ads and stuff, and then his ad cost was really high. So I said, okay, so you do have a problem with the ad cost, but the reason for that is probably because your product is really highly priced relative to everything else. So actually, it's not a terrible thing at all. I mean, you've got plenty of scope to reduce your margin, which is never words you want to hear. But, the ad cost will probably reduce hugely because it will look like better value. So I said there'll be a sweet spot in the middle. So again, he thought it was a bit broken. I was there to say, well, yeah, actually it's not bad. If you get the right blend between price and advertising spend, that's where the maximum profit is. And for example, the fact he didn't know the fact that Amazon, I think at one point, this is a micro example, that shifted all their money they were spending on advertising and put it all to take money off the price of the products, which is effectively a way of doing marketing, but not a very radical way of doing it. And actually they got a better return on investment. And I was more or less suggesting the same strategy to him. And that was, again, once you know that, it kind of makes sense. Once you've experienced it, you go, oh yeah, I look at the economics of the cost of driving traffic versus the conversion rate, and then you figure it out. But as you say, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what other people are doing if you're not with your peers. And I have to say again, banging the drum for masterminds, that's a great way to quickly benchmark across, even not the whole industry, at least 10 other businesses, whatever's in the room as well.
Well, the way you just described it, I liked, which is it's almost like an engine. And the mechanic hears an engine and says, I know exactly what's wrong with this engine. Whereas the layperson, you're just the car driver, they're like, my car is broken. Like, I don't know what's wrong. It's just broken. But the mechanic knows exactly how to sort it out. And you're right. And the cautionary tale there is, you can get, I know it sounds funny to say, but you can get into a 6-figure e-commerce business accidentally almost. It's so it is the barrier to entry for many selling methods is so low now.
Yeah.
But what happens frequently is there's no profit, or there's kind of frustrations around other parts of it, and people don't know which direction to go. And the worst scenario is they give up on a good business because they hear a big clank in the engine or the transmission, or they can't get it to shift into second gear, when in fact there are parts that are working wonderfully, or maybe even amazingly. There are just a couple parts that are messed up. And to your point, A good coach is like, I know how to fix this. Let's work on this certain element, and it's going to magically come together. And and a lot of that in our business revolves around optimization of net profit and methods for. And we get a lot of people who have come into the industry, built a 6-figure, even 7-figure business in terms of top line sales, which is what everyone always focuses on at the beginning, but haven't clarified how net profit actually works well, and the systems by which they have money left at the end of the month. The net profit component, lots of detail and technical insights into all of that, are important. So anyway, love your example there.
Yeah, and I like that as well. I mean, I actually literally know a couple of people who've worked with me in the past, and yeah, they got to 7 figures, and they were doing stuff that, to me, I just thought, you're working so hard, you're doing so many things really, really well, that are super hard, like producing fantastically engineered products, but they'd so over-engineered the product that their cash conversion cycle was horrible to my mind, and their profit margin was a few percent. And I thought, this is tragic, because you're working so hard, but you're not getting paid, and because there's an imbalance in the system. So because they were so expert in one area, it was like a guy who'd been working out in the gym, and his right bicep was just huge, and his left arm was kind of withered little thing, and needed to be rebalanced. And you kind of can't see that, especially if you happen to have a real technical skill. It can make you almost a worse entrepreneur. It's a weird thing to say. I mean, it just depends how it happens to pan out by luck when you start off, whether that aligns with the market and your business model, and how it all comes together. But I do think that exactly what you said, the flip side is, if that guy then turns around in a year and goes, I'm sick of working for a 4% profit margin, and just gives up, that would be a tragic waste of all the great strengths he had in the business. So it's re-engineering rather than a black, again, to the point of not yes or no, but like that middle ground where you re-engineer something that in essence has a lot of strengths and some serious weaknesses. You re-engineer it, and you can turn it around. Sometimes it's straightforward. Sometimes it's that's more involved than my little hack with this relative newcomer who's got a couple of products.
Well, let's move to things you can look for in a coach. And we've got a few things here. Let's just rattle them off quickly, and then we can just kind of recap and challenge people to next steps. So things to look for when you're looking for a coach. A coach should, we think, align with the specific business model, or in e-commerce land, platform in which you want to operate in. So if you're building an Amazon business, don't look for an e-commerce coach that's only worked on WooCommerce or Alibaba. So look for a platform-specific coach that really does have deep domain knowledge and proven domain knowledge in their own right with their own brands. And I always like to say to everybody, like, if your coach or consultant or guru won't say, here's my brand, here's exactly what I sell, go look at my store, go look at my sales outcomes. If they can't do that, they're not a competent coach. And it's just that simple. In my view. And I know that's harsh, because I know that there are a lot of coaches who are, for specific reasons, not putting out their brand or their name or their company or whatever, and still want to be coaches. But in my view, you have to be able to say, here's my examples that I can show you for my technical ability on the platform that I work in. So that's the first one. I think the second one is you need a coach that can align with your strategically position goals. So for example, I work with a lot of people who are great on Amazon but do nothing on Shopify, but I'm okay with that because they're total newbies on Shopify, but I get that they're really successful e-commerce sellers already. And so the alignment there is important. If they didn't want to launch into Shopify, I wouldn't be a good coach for them, and or if they, so you got to get that strategy piece where you're on the same set of business outcomes. And I think the third thing is you've got to have a coach that gets really good at tactical planning and operations. If a coach is not very good at the tactical marketing, tactical platform use, those kinds of elements, I think there's something wrong there. And then I think it's also finally somebody who really can hold you accountable, and that you're willing to hold you accountable. And the coaching sessions in which awkwardness ensues is when, as a coach, I'd like to talk about some part of someone's business and they'd rather gloss over that area because they frankly don't want to talk about it. They're challenged by it and don't want to bring it up, or, and they're not ready to be held accountable to, an issue or outcome related in that certain area.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on things you need to think about for the coaching?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think the important thing is they're not just aligned with your needs in terms of a technical platform, but they actually also operate the same business model on it. Because particularly on Amazon, for example, there's so many, you know better than me these days, ironically, because of running all your Amazon sort of challenges and things, that there's so many different business models for selling on Amazon, and they seem to an outsider pretty similar. And I said to this guy the other day, he was not sure what business model to run. I said, two things. I said, first of all, you need to consider whether private labeling is right for you. And I spoke to him. I said, what outcomes you want? He said, I just want to make cash quickly. And I said, okay, it isn't right for you then, in my personal opinion. And therefore I won't be the right person to help you. I can probably pass you on to somebody else. In fact, I probably need to chat to you about Danny Stock and his coaching and consulting and whatever else he offers. But the point is, I couldn't help that guy because even though it's all about Amazon selling, and I know a lot more about Amazon selling than he does, I don't specialize in the business model to the depth that he needs it. So that's the first thing. The business model matters.
Yeah.
I think, the tactical and planning operation stuff is less important for a more advanced business. I think that's really important for the 6-7 Amazon or Shopify or e-commerce sellers generally, because you're still very hands-on with the operations. If it's a bigger business, strategic and more abstract advice can make more sense. I think that the operational piece is pretty important for most of the people that we are probably addressing there, right?
Yeah.
And then, I take your point about willingness to have people hold you accountable. I think that brings us neatly back to the sort of start of the discussion. What is the nature of the coaching relationship, or a coach, consultant, mentor? I guess, there are different flavors of people, and some people are more hardcore and some people are more relaxed. And you need to just be clear about what it is you need and want, and whether the person you're talking to is that kind of person. Because if you need somebody tough and they're a bit relaxed, that could be just as bad as the other way around, actually. I personally would rather err on the side of somebody who's positive, but in the end, very direct. It depends on your personal preference where you are on that sort of spectrum. But I think that's got to be a match, because otherwise you could have a lot of pleasant conversations and then things drift for months. And that's actually not doing you any favors.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. I totally agree with that. And coaching, I would just say, as you and I coach people, it's a real trick to know, what do people need?
Yeah. It's not easy always. Yeah,
what is the best way to actually help, support, encourage? Because that's the goal. Obviously, the goal is to help them be successful. 100%. But then the question is, what is the best path to helping them be successful? And that's always the trick. So, well, this is a wonderful conversation. Let's do a little recap. So, the first question is, figure out whether you need a coach, a technical consultant, or a mentor, and or maybe a mastermind group, which would be a group, dynamic, which we talked about in our prior episode. Those are the different options. And then, you want to think through the ways in which a coach can help you, and then the ways in which you should think about getting a coach, how you should look at, what they can do for you, and have alignment with what your outcomes are. So
and just to recap your list, which I thought was a good one, the sort of 5 basic ways that a coach can help you is number 1, technical skills improvement, number 2, a business advisory or sounding board, which is more general, and the bigger you get, I think the more important that is, by the way. Third thing is a cheerleader, which I really like, and I need to work on that more. I'm too sort of British. I need to be more encouraging when people achieve their aims, and you'll bang on about that. Number 4 is a warning provider, risk assessment provider if you want. And number 5 is a confidence builder by giving you context, which is really, really important. So, those are great things. So, obviously, you offer coaching at winningonshopify.com. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your coaching practice, how that works?
Sure. Kyle and I do it together. Every session we generally both on the sessions, and it's a 6-month program. Currently it's $2,000 a month, so it's not inexpensive. And we have an amazing group of clients we work with. And we do it by application only, and we do a front-end conversation where we figure out whether the client is right for us and whether we're right for the client. And we have certainly, many times had it either way be the case that we're not a good match. And so we have a wonderful group. And we also put our group of individual coaching clients into what we call our CEO mastermind, which is they get to meet each other and they have a weekly meeting as a group, which we facilitate, which is a blast. And actually, that's just it's been amazing. It's turned into a great mastermind. We started that just in 6 months ago or so, and it's just been terrific. And so that's the way our program works. When people need technical insights into certain areas, sometimes Kyle leads conversations. And in other areas, I lead. Generally, I'm the Shopify and general branding guy, and Kyle's very, very technical marketing, detail savvy, and Amazon centric in his approach. Super competent in those areas, and so that's how our program works. And fun time. So winningonshopify.com is where people can check it out, and there's in the menu structure something that says coaching. Yeah,
excellent. Good.
How about you?
About that.
Yeah.
So offered 2 basic forms as well, so that one-to-one work and the mastermind. Although I have got something coming up, actually, I'll talk about in a second. It's new, so which makes a change because I've been doing the other stuff for several years. So amazingfba.com/mentoring. Is it mentoring? Is it coaching? I'm not quite sure.
Minor details.
I guess so. Yeah, so I mean, it's been geared to the needs of people who are new to the space. Generally speaking, more and more, as the percentage of people who've already established is getting bigger. Not just Amazon. It turns out that some of the stuff I offer, I've got a person on bol.com. We're working on his sort of a lot of the structures, particularly his financial strategy, which has been a lot of fun. I think it's fun because I'm that kind of nerd. And then just got a Shopify store in his approach. When I did say, look, I'm not an expert in Shopify. I will have to pass you on to somebody at some point. And he said, that's fine, but he wants to import stuff from China. I said, okay, well, that is something I can help with. So I've done a lot of that and worked with a lot of people. So that's that program. Again, I try not to be too cheap, because if people, to your point about your story of the guitar player, if people aren't committed, they won't commit to action. And if they don't take action, they're kind of wasting their time anyway. And I'd rather that we just said no thanks and parted as friends. Yeah. And then the other one is the amazonmastermind.com, where we've been operating for 3.5 years. We're now 100% online. We'll probably be venturing back to some face-to-face meetings in London, England soon. So it helps if you're this side of the pond. But we have Europeans in there as well. Anyone from Netherlands and Spain, for example, we've had people in. And the thing that's coming up that I want to do is blend the two, which I'm really excited about. It's got a new program coming up, which is going to be specifically for those doing between about $10,000 and $50,000 a month on Amazon, which is an awkward stage of business. And that's going to be a blend of group and one-to-one, which I think is going to be really cool. So if you want to check that out, just simply email me, michael@amazingfba.com. So that's more calls to action than any podcast should ever have ever. That's ridiculous. But anyway, so
the final call to action I would say is, if you didn't go back and listen to our prior podcast about masterminds, we just dropped that one recently, so it should just be right underneath this one, I would assume. Yeah. Listen to that one, because the alternate to one-on-one coaching is, of course, joining a mastermind group, which is, we did a deep dive on that topic as well. So that would be another thing people could check out.
Yeah, and frankly, I think that's the thing that I probably offer that's best. I do a lot of one-on-one stuff, and I think we've got some solid results for people. But I think the mastermind thing is quite a special thing, and I'm quite passionate about that, and we've done a lot of it. There's another Richard Branson quote to top it off, which is, he says, culture beats strategy or eats strategy for breakfast. And there is something about the culture of a good mastermind, which sounds like we've both got going in our respective corners of the world, that is a very special thing. And it doesn't have to be either or. In the end, you can combine one-to-one coaching and a mastermind, which is the best possible of all worlds, right?
Absolutely right. All right, man. As always, amazing conversation. Thank you for your insights and perspective. And it's really an honor to be able to do the E-commerce Leader podcast with you. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
And there you have it. That's our podcast. All right, friends. Thanks for hanging out with us today while we're recording this. I got to run. That was just exactly an hour, so that was really cool.
Yeah, we're getting very professional at this.
Yeah. Nailed it. Maybe. I don't know, whatever. All right, man. Good stuff, as always, and thank you again for watching live with us. If you're watching live, feel free to ask questions, leave comments underneath this video. It's an honor for the hearts and thumbs ups to be hit there. We appreciate those every Sunday morning, my time, Sunday afternoon, Michael's time. So great stuff. Thanks, man. See ya.
Cheers.